Dear friends, we join together this afternoon to remember one who filled our world with her love, her goodness, her outstanding spirit and example. In humility and gratitude, we turn to the wisdom of our tradition for comfort, for guidance, and for understanding. Throughout the centuries, our people have declared, "I lift up my eyes to the mountains. What is the source of my help? My help comes from Adonai, maker of heaven and earth." Esainai el Erim me'ayin Yavo Ezri Esainai el Erim me'ayin Yavo Ezri Me'im Adonai Ose Shamayim Baretz Ezri Me'im Adonai Ose Shamayim Varetz. I lift up my eyes unto the mountains, from where will my help come? I lift up my eyes unto the mountains, from where will my help come? O God, what are we that you have regard for us? What are we that you are mindful of us? We are like a breath. Our days are like a passing shadow. We come and go like grass which in the morning shoots up renewed, and in the evening fades and withers. You cause us to turn to dust, saying, "Return, O mortal creatures." Would that we were wise, that we understood whither we are going, for when we die, we carry nothing away. Our glory does not accompany us. Mark the wholehearted, and behold the upright. They shall have peace. For those of you for whom the 23rd Psalm is familiar, I invite you to join with me. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. It is a fearful thing to love what death can touch. A fearful thing to love, hope, dream, to be. To be and oh, to lose, a thing for fools this, and a holy thing to love. For your life has lived in me. Your laugh once lifted me. Your word was gift to me. To remember this brings painful joy. 'Tis a human thing, love, a holy thing, to love what death has touched. My dear Paul, dear Betsy, Darren, Stacy, and Dan, dear Shell and Jane, Sophia and Reuben, dear family, friends. There was something about Lynda Rippner that was wonderfully old world. It's not that she wasn't contemporary and with it, current and up to date, but she evoked and lived a time of relationships, an era when people took the time to be friendly, to meet their neighbors, to visit and to chat, to share the details of their lives, the ordinary happenings of their everyday. Lynda had her interests and her many activities. She was on the go, engaged, dynamic, and she exulted in every endeavor. But for Lynda, life was about relationships. Every card game, every meal, every shopping expedition, every exercise class, tennis game, hair appointment, holiday celebration, travel destination, work or volunteer endeavor, even her beloved flea markets, involved connecting with others. Sometimes it meant being with friends she had known all her life. Often it meant meeting a new lifelong friend. Lynda was not indiscriminate. There were those about whom she would say, "Not impressed." She was never a pushover. She was strong-minded and opinionated. As her children affirmed, she gave it to you straight, whether you wanted it or not. But she had so many friends. She and Paul had so many friends from every interest, activity, or destination. It is hard to imagine many left behind. She was outgoing, vivacious, upbeat, enthusiastic. She was curious and adventurous, funny, stubborn, and repetitive. She loved this life and embraced it with her whole heart and soul through every loved one, every treasured friend, every cherished relationship. For Lynda, all that she valued, all that she held dear, all that she loved to do and see and experience began and ended with relationships. She invested the time, energy, and interest that had become less common in this age of texts and tweets, of social media frequently substituting for social interaction. She was never cursory or superficial. She was interested in and cared about the details of people's lives, and it did not matter how or why an individual had come into her life. A friend was a friend, whether from the Taylor grade school, Heights High, or the police station where she worked one summer and told a student co-worker that she would never last as the nun she wanted to be. She was absolutely correct. It extended to her friends from college, substitute teaching, her fellow PTA members, her manicurist, card friends, housekeeper, or the nurses who cared for her so tenderly. She learned their stories. She heard about their families. She appreciated their triumphs and heartbreaks and shared, her children would say far too frequently, the stories of her life that she never tired of telling. That was part of her charm and her gift for connecting with others. She was genuine. She was authentic. Her warmth and interest came from her love of life and the people who animated her life. In many ways, she had an enviable childhood. As the firstborn child of Della and Hy Busney, brother Sheldon arrived 7 years later. Her earliest years were in East Cleveland, where her father was a pharmacist at Commodore Drug at 147th and Lakeshore Boulevard, on the way to Euclid Beach. Hy functioned as the unofficial doc of the neighborhood, a role which his son, Sheldon, made real in his life when he became an ophthalmologist, and with wife Jane, had 2 children, Elizabeth and Catherine, both of whom are physicians. Elizabeth is married to Dr. Eric Rosenthal, and with their 2 children, Victoria and Eleanor, send their love across the miles. Catherine is here with her parents, and we think also of her fiancé, Jacob Hausman. Well, Lynda did not go into the medical side of the family business. As a teenager, she did work one summer in the store, behind the soda fountain counter, where she seems to have flirted with the non-Jewish boy on the floor, until her parents put a stop to that. Lynda's family moved from East Cleveland to her grandparents' house on Goodner Road in Cleveland Heights when she was in grade school. Initially, it may have been because Della's mother, Anne, was ill, and that way Della could help out with her care. Whatever the reason may have been, Papa Louis, Della's father, became an important presence in Lynda and Sheldon's lives. He was a gentle, multi-talented man whose quiet constancy was supportive and encouraging. He used to pack their lunches every day, and Lynda loved his egg sandwiches. He could tailor and would also make her skirts while running a furniture store. 3 generations lived in that house, and they all got along without fighting or conflicts. Both Hai and Della came from big families, so there were always aunts, uncles, and cousins, or a combination thereof, stopping by to visit and kibitz and often pull up a chair for dinner. It was a deeply nurturing, beneficial, and supportive environment. Lynda thus grew up in a home where many people loved her and cared about her. She, in turn, loved her school years, particularly those at Heights High, where she was the treasurer of her class, belonged to the ABL club. We're not sure what it meant. Always be loyal, and had lots of friends. Someone here may know. And had lots of friends, many of whom she just saw again this summer at a reunion. It was typical of Lynda that after the reunion festivities, about 20 friends came over to continue the evening. As an education major in college, she did her student teaching at the McGuffey School, but as a young mother, she did mostly substitute teaching with friend Nancy Gilbert, as the 2 of them were generally sent together to the same school in the Cleveland Heights, University Heights School District, while Paul's mom, Lucille, would watch Betsy. It is not surprising that she took pleasure in volunteering for the PTA when Betsy and Stacy were in school, for Mount Sinai, for the Parents Planning Committee of the Heights Singers Tour. She was a youthful, present, and involved mother. She was available and accessible to her children for a chat, for support, for encouragement. She knew Betsy and Stacy's friends, their interests, their activities. Both Lynda and Paul were popular parents, as their home was always open, and they were adults who listened and paid attention to their children and their children's friends. They gave their children the great gift of believing in them and supporting them in making important decisions in their lives. She was also pretty strict about expectations, standards of behavior, consequences, and rituals. Removal of the yellow phone was a first-tier consequence, but there was always a limit, and goodwill was quickly restored. The family always sat down for a home-cooked dinner when the phone would not be answered. Lynda was a stickler, when everything was cleaned up afterwards, that the kitchen was closed for the night. All of the Jewish holidays were observed with big family dinners that featured her delicious chicken soup, brisket, and noodle kugel. For Lynda, Judaism was pretty much defined by the meals and the sociability. She hosted the breakfast for 30 years and the Seders for a time at the Lyndhurst Community Center with another family. Paul and Lynda pursued many of their favorite activities with other couples and or families. They discovered Chautauqua with a trailer and their dear friends David and Errol Shack, Zichronam Livracha. They graduated from the trailer park to a house with lake rights to an A-frame on the lake itself. Their interests also developed from boating and water sports to the lectures, programs, classes, and concerts offered by the Chautauqua Institute. they both enjoyed those, especially after Paul retired. They made wonderful friends at Chautauqua, whom they greatly enjoyed being with, and with whom Paul enjoyed golfing. It was a magical place for many summers, until inevitably people's lives began to change, and never afraid to move into a new stage, Paul and Lynda sold the house to the daughter of dear friends, thereby keeping it in the family. They traveled with friends to the Caribbean, Italy, New Zealand, and Australia, to Israel on a mission. They explored St. Martin, Aruba, Mexico. They started to spend some time each winter on the east coast of Florida, and then discovered Longboat Key. They went with friends. They reconnected with friends. They made new friends wherever they went. At the blackjack table in Vegas, on the tennis court, shopping for purses. They had so many friends, more in Florida, Stacy observed, than she has. They could be out socially every night of the week, and frequently were. But this was Lynda. Her passion for life was inseparable from her passion for people. Whatever she might be doing, whatever she and Paul might be experiencing, was only enhanced, made richer, and more enjoyable by sharing it with others. This was true of her aerobics class, her hair salon, which, when pressed, she admitted was her justified vice, her regular card games of pan, mage, and bridge, and flea markets. Lynda Rippner loved flea markets. She loved to look, loved to buy, loved to collect. She loved the challenge of it and the sport of it. And over the years, she developed an excellent eye and a refined sense of how much to spend for anything. Over the years, she collected 108 Toby mugs. She collected advertising paraphernalia and items one would have found in a general store, including an old wooden phone booth. Every now and then, she would find something of real value, but she only bought what she liked. She didn't buy to make a profit. It was such a pleasure for her when Stacy and Betsy became interested as well. Betsy collected Donald Duck memorabilia, and Stacy looked for anything made in occupied Japan. It was a limited amount of things. They all exulted over $1 purchases that might have gone for far more. Lynda loved this life. She loved every one of her activities and interests. Her enjoyment began and ended with the people with whom she could share her enthusiasms. She treasured every one of her relationships, but at the heart of her life, of her world, was her family. She was a devoted daughter, daughter-in-law, and granddaughter. Even with the physical distance of their adult years, she remained close with Brother Sheldon and his family, as both families made special efforts to be together on Thanksgiving and other times throughout the year. Shell has shared the following thoughts. Lynda was the most loving, caring, and supportive sister any guy could ever wish for, through good times and bad. I and all of us were blessed that God gave her to us, and Lynda made the best ever spaghetti salad. I could never get enough of it. It was in her roles as wife, mother, and grandmother that Lynda found her greatest fulfillment and unbounded joy. She was close to Betsy and Stacy as they were growing up. She has remained with Paul, accessible, generous, involved in their adult lives, as Betsy married Darren and brought Sophie into the world, as Stacy had Reuben and the good fortune to meet Dan through the agency of David Shack. Paul and Lynda embraced Darren and Dan as true children of their hearts, and after their children, nothing could make them happier or prouder than their grandchildren. They were present as much as possible when Sophie was growing up. They would travel to Vermont and create special memories of letting her stay in the hotel with them, to swim in the pool, to go for ice cream, and to sleep in the middle of the bed with them. It became a bit harder as Sophie got older, but Lynda and Paul would travel to Vermont every few months to see them. And the family is entirely grateful for having been together just weeks ago for Sophie's high school graduation before going off to the University of Rhode Island. Paul and Lynda also had great fun introducing both Sophie and Reuben to the racetrack in Sarasota. Reuben started teaching people how to play blackjack when he was 4. And he took up Monopoly at 5. In addition to his grandmother's game-loving gene, he shared with her their own bedtime story ritual. It belonged just to the two of them, as whenever he stayed over, she would continue the telling of an original story that was just their special narrative. They met at the Temple on the Heights. She was 15, he was 16. They went to each other's proms, although when he went off to Miami of Ohio, they decided to date other people. That seems not to have lasted very long. She went off to Ohio State a year later, but after her freshman year, she transferred to Miami. They became pinned, and they married while still in college on August 19th, 1959. He was 20, and she was 19. And the only way they could marry was with the permission of her parents. Her father gave it, but only after she promised that she would finish college, which she did at Western Reserve a year after he graduated. For a far too brief, almost 58 years, they grew up together. They raised their family together. They learned and explored and enjoyed and experienced all of life's challenges and joys together. They walked side by side and hand in hand as partners, lovers, fellow adventurers, and best friends. They were profoundly connected and knew they were lucky because they had each other. Lucky and blessed in all things except length of years, which is part of why this is such a shock. Since the birth of her children, Lynda had not been in a hospital for herself, only for Paul. Even now, it is hard to accept that one who lived with heart, who led with heart, whose ever interaction was heartfelt, should leave us through a failure of her heart. That is not what we will remember. She was far too exuberant, generous, funny, bossy, and loving for us to remember her any other way. Can we not imagine her, even now, gathering the angels for an outing to the heavenly flea market and being the first to spot a collectible for eternity? Zichrona livracha. May her memory as wife, mother, grandmother, sister, aunt, our dear and precious friend, be always for blessing. And we say, Amen. When I die, remember me with a smile and laughter. If thoughts of me provoke no love, only sadness and tears, I ask that I be soon forgotten. Give what's left of me away to children and old ones who wait to die. And if you must cry, cry for your brother or sister who walks in grief beside you. And when you need me, put your arms around anyone and give them what you need to give to me. You can love me most by letting love live within the circle of your arms, embracing the frightened ones. Love doesn't die. People do. So when all that's left of me is love, give me away. I call now on daughters Betsy and Stacy, who will share some family reflections with us.
So I want to talk a bit about a book I read earlier this summer called A Gentleman in Moscow, written by Amor Towles. It's a wonderful book about an aristocrat named Count Alexander Ilyich Rostov, who was arrested by the Bolsheviks in 1922. Instead of being put to death, he is put under house arrest in his last residence, the Metropole Hotel, a grand hotel in Theater Square in the heart of Moscow. If he leaves, he knows he will be shot. I'm telling you this not just because it's a wonderful book, but because it was the subject of one of the last conversations that I had with my mom. My mom had a few days in the hospital where she was absolutely herself, and we talked with her about everything. She knew I was reading the book on her recommendation and asked if I had finished it. I had, and Stacy hadn't, so we had to kick her out of the room for a bit in order not to spoil it for her. Having thought about this conversation, I realized that my mom is in some ways like the Count in the story, and not just because she was a little bit of what you might call a hotel snob. The Count was able to turn this hotel into his own microcosm of the world by befriending all kinds of people that worked or ate or stayed there. Like him, my mom made friends with everyone she came into contact, no matter the race, religion, social class, or any of the other things that can unfortunately keep people apart. We saw this even in the hospital as we watched her form relationships with her nurses and attendants. While she was a pretty darn good talker, she was also a good listener. She remembered things about people because she was genuinely interested in them. A friend from Vermont who recently saw her at Sophie's graduation party just wrote this to me. What a beautiful lady to recall some tidbit about me that made me feel special. That's a gift. And I know so many of you out there thought of my mom as a sister, an aunt, or even a second mother. That too is a gift. My mom loved nice things, but it was family and friends that were most important to her. The book also centers around the Count's love of good food and drink, and my mom always needed to know what was happening for the next meal. Last September, she began fretting about where and what we would eat after Sophie's graduation, 9 months from then. I've been continually hearing about all of you out there after you've been out to eat with my mom, and I might even be able to tell you what you ate and what you thought of it. While she did love her food, again, I believe it was the social aspect of sharing meals that she loved most. Though not an aristocrat like the Count, my mom sure did like having her nails and her hair done, as well as adding to her vast collection of purses. But like the Count in the story, who winds up working in the hotel and helping many people along the way, my mom was always there to help us when we were growing up with whatever we needed, and as adults helped us move, fix up our houses, or do whatever we needed of her. The bottom line is that she and my dad were always there for us, and I know many of you feel the same way. I used to think, probably as many kids do, that my mom was so different than me and really didn't know me. I never wore makeup, though I know it wouldn't kill me, as she'd say. Was definitely never a sorority girl. I left taking care of Sophie's hair and nails to Darren. I'm not the hugest shopper, and my house will never, ever be as clean as hers. My daughter, on the other hand, was very much more in sync with her Nana in some of these ways. And Darren and I wondered how some things that don't seem biological can skip a generation. Might there be a clothes and makeup gene? Anyway, as I grew up, I realized how wrong I was. My mom knew me better and differently than anyone. Though I might argue with her at the time, she would point things out to me that helped me understand myself. She told it as she saw it and said things that no one else might say because it was in my best interest, because she was my mom. She was always involved in our lives and always there for us. How blessed we were to experience unconditional love. From her and my dad, we know what is truly valuable, good friends and family, and being open to all types of people in this world. Stacy and I were just plain old lucky to have her as our mom. Like Count Rostov in the story, my mom was able to show us how to love our memories, but to enjoy the present and make new ones, no matter where you are.
I'm going to share a few memories and a poem. My mom moved in with me for a week right after Reuben was born. We both loved telling the story about one of the first nights after Reuben came home from the hospital. I was a very nervous new mom, and we were sitting in the upstairs hallway trying to comfort Reuben, who was crying. And my mom suddenly blurted out, "You really need some more outlets up here." It was a funny comment since we were not trying to find a place to plug anything in at that moment. And I immediately started crying, but I managed to spit out the words, "I don't care about outlets. All I'm worried about is keeping my son alive." We laughed every time we retold the story. Last night, I was flooded with the memory of my mom and I shopping 5.5 years ago at St. Armand's Circle in between Longboat Key and Sarasota in Florida. Dan was working in Tampa that day, and Reuben and my dad were hanging out at the pool or the beach. We were at phase 1 of looking for my wedding dress. I found a blue silk sleeveless knee-length dress in the second store we went to. We both loved it. My mom bought me the dress, which I will inappropriately share with you cost less than most of her purses. And then we went out for lunch. Wedding dress shopping was not something either of us thought we would ever do together, but it was a perfect afternoon. Lynda loved back scratches, her perfectly made and fluffed bed, flea markets and house sales, family meals on the porch of the Chautauqua A-frame, getting her hair washed at the beauty shop. Lynda loved Paul, her high school sweetheart, reading on her blue-flowered couch, purses, her 2 daughters, but she thought it wouldn't kill us to wear makeup on a regular basis, working in her dad's drugstore. Lynda loved Sophie and Reuben, hot bubble baths, iceberg lettuce piled high on any sandwich, smoking Virginia Slim menthol lights, but only in her kitchen, and she quit before Sophie was born because she didn't want to be a smoking grandma. Lynda loved Darren and Dan talking, a spotless kitchen, asking what did they serve after any party I went to, being with family, talking. Lynda loved eating stone crabs, her pan, bridge, and Maj games, room service at a nice hotel, her friends. Being a Heights High student, Lynda loved coconut ice cream, telling the same story 20 times, spider mums, her cousins, nieces, nephews, aunts, and uncles. Lynda loved flowery fracas perfume, Thanksgiving get-togethers, slot machines, and blackjack, crisp iron sheets, drinking Tab in the 80s. Lynda loved her childhood, watching Days of Our Lives for 56 years, sales at Nordstrom, being Della and Hi's daughter and Shelley's big sister, talking.
I'm going to read something that Sophie, my daughter, her granddaughter, wrote. My Nana was an outstanding grandmother to both Reuben and I. Although I was born and live in Vermont, my grandparents never failed to come see me and my family. They would drive 10 hours or hop on a plane and fly to come see my family. My Nana is one of the people I look up to in life, along with my papa. I loved hearing about her days at the beauty shop, her exercise classes, and all of the amazing trips that she and my papa have been on. She never failed to make me smile. She was one of the most influential, supportive, fun, and caring person that I think I have ever met in my entire life. I will absolutely miss the days that we both go out to lunch together and when she would take me on a shopping spree, or when I would go to her beauty shop and get my hair done with her by my side, also getting her hair done. My mom tells me all the time how I remind her of Nana. That statement is such a great honor to hear. It's an honor and a treat to be Lynda Rippner's granddaughter.
Thank you for those beautiful and wonderfully evocative reminiscences of your mom. O God, you give us loved ones and make them the strength of our life, the light of our eyes. They depart and leave us bereft on a lonely way. But you are the living fountain from which our healing flows. To you the stricken look for comfort and the sorrow-laden for consolation. O God, we see life as through windows that open on eternity. We see that love endures and the soul endures. as you, O God, endure forever. We see that the years are more than grass that withers, more than flowers that fade. They weave a timeless pattern in a world that is the dwelling place of your love and glory. Please rise. מלא רחמים, שוכן במרומים, אמצעי מנוחה נכונה, תחת כנפי השכינה, עם קדושים וטהורים, כזור רקיע מזהירים את נשמת לאה אסתר בת חיים ודבורה שהלכה לעולמה. בעל הרחמים יסתירה בסתר כנפיו לעולמים, ויצרו החיים את נשמתה. אדוני הוא נחלתה, ותנוח בשלום על משכבה, ונאמר Amen. Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Lynda Rippner, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let her find refuge in your eternal presence, and let her soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is her inheritance. May she rest in peace. And let us say, Amen. The family will be returning to Stacy and Dan Kamenakowski's home immediately following internment at Mayfield Cemetery at 2728 Rockland Road. They will be there today until 9, tomorrow and Tuesday from 2 to 5, and 6:30 until 9.